Hi, I'm Lynn.
And I'm Amanda, and this is The Pursuit of Badasserie, the podcast.
This podcast is all about taking action and creating that badass business abundance and life that you want.
Where we share stories, laughs, wins, and epic fails to show you the whole picture of the entrepreneurial journey.
It's not just unicorns and rainbows, people.
Jump on and follow us through this raw and witty roller coaster,
where we get down and dirty and go behind the scenes of life and entrepreneurship.
Get on it,
get over it,
and get after it.
Hey, I'm Lynn.
And I'm Amanda. Welcome to The Pursuit of Badasserie, the podcast. Today, we're talking strategy. What is strategic thinking, and how can we be more strategic in our processes as entrepreneurs? Let's get after it.
Yes. Essentially, being strategic is being intentional with an end in mind or a point in the future in mind. So overall, that's the simplified version of being strategic. Would you add something to that?
Well, I mean, I think that's the gist of it. Trying to look ahead, think ahead, plan ahead, foresee the future. It's almost like being psychic. You got to kind of think about all the options that you have. Particularly in the business and entrepreneurship world, there's so many things that can happen, I mean, I guess in every aspect of life. And when you're in a leadership role within the business sphere, I think it's really important that you do embrace strategy as one of the most important things that you can do as an entrepreneur.
Absolutely. It's funny, I this week I've been going down this rabbit hole again with a couple of different people about how they always start a bunch of projects, right? So they're starting all of these projects, but they're not really finishing them. And I was actually doing an analysis with a couple of them, like, why is that? Some of it's behavioral style, but a lot of it actually was because they didn't have strategic thinking in place, and coupled with critical thinking. They couldn't see the big picture. Right? They were excited about this one thing. They didn't see how this played into the rest of their life, their other businesses, their family, all of these other aspects that are part of who they are and what they represent. And so going back to why we're here is one of the first things that we feel like you need to do is really look at the big picture, look at that end result, the long-term goals, and that could be in many different things. It's also a little bit of the fiber of the why are you doing this? You don't have to go as deep as the what's your why, although that will help, but really understanding what that long-term goal is.
Absolutely. I think setting clear goals is pretty much the start of it for for me, a lot of times, because you're really defining what success looks like for you in that moment in time. What is it that you're striving for? And what are your ultimate objectives? What are you trying to achieve? Because if you are on a wishy-washy path where you don't have any goals in mind, how do you know that you've reached your destination? And how do you know if you're even on the right path if you don't have anything laid out in front of you? And so for both the short term and long term, I think it really helps to clarify to make sure those goals do align with all your strategic decisions. You can't just throw things out there and hope that everything is going to stick. We're not cooking with my Nona here. We're not throwing spaghetti on the wall. We want to make sure that things are strategically in place and that we have really specified goals, because for everybody who's heard of the SMART goal terminology, and I don't even remember the first time I heard about SMART goals, but setting those attainable, specific, measurable goals does make a difference. I mean, it's like saying, oh, I'm going to be richer next year. Okay, great. But what is richer? Richer emotionally, richer spiritually, like $10 richer, $100,000 richer? What does that mean? Because if you just throw these crazy goals out there with no specificity, then how are you going to be able to reach them? How are you going to be able to set strategies behind them? How are you going to be able to quantify and qualify whether or not you've reached them?
It's not just about you aligning with your goals, but it's also about the goals aligning with where you're going. And so also understanding what your big vision is, because that's not goals. Your big vision it's a feeling. There's some tangibles that can be in there, but I think that that's really important. I mean, obviously been listening to our podcast, Amanda and I love goals, and there's definitely a kind of a rundown of what a strategic goal is. When you are looking at being strategic with anything, it's kind of reverse engineering. We love reverse engineering. So understanding, starting with the end in mind, so that way you can look at, like Amanda said, all the different obstacles milestones. The next thing would be also prioritization. Amanda talks all the time about Eisenhower matrix, which is a great tool, a great asset, but absolutely understanding what needs to come first, what give you big results for little effort sometimes. But prioritization is huge in the strategic thinking realm.
Absolutely. I will speak till I'm blue in the face about prioritization, but I also think it's about agility and flexibility, because there's more than one way to eat a Reese's. There's more than one way to get to Bangkok. Like, there's more than one way to do something. And so if you're able to stay flexible and sort of prioritize what needs to be done, but also be flexible in how you get it done, because life is lifing. Life is lifing hard right now. And you have to be able to shift and reprioritize and remain agile, remain flexible in how you are prioritizing your day and how you're prioritizing your goals, how you're prioritizing those benchmarkers that lead up, as if, Lynn talking about reverse engineering, which we are huge fans of. And sometimes you have this beautiful reverse engineered plan, and then shit hits the fan and you can't do it the way you thought you were going to do it. It's not going to work that way for whatever reason. Life is lifing. And I think staying agile, staying flexible, really understanding your priorities is huge when it comes to your strategic decision making, because ultimately, if you get derailed every time something goes wrong, you're never going to get where you're trying to go, because something is always going to go wrong. And I know that's very pessimistic, like, yay, that's my job to point that out. But there's no such thing as an entrepreneurial journey that is meeting your absolute potential that is smooth sailing the entire time. Calm seas do not a skilled sailor make. So in the entrepreneurial world, you have to know that there's going to be unpredictable, crazy things that happen. And your ability to pivot, to re-strategize, to rethink, remain flexible, and to reprioritize is going to be crucial when you're trying to think of your decision-making process.
Yeah, I love that you brought up the agility, the resilience muscle that all of us should be building. We don't have to wait for something shitty to happen. We can build that muscle before we need it. And resilience thinking and agile thinking absolutely plays a part in strategic thinking as well. Another thing is being proactive and not reactive. So strategy is more about that proactive thought, that proactive action, that proactive even response versus reacting, right? So proactive can be in the anticipation of, like Amanda was kind of speaking about, but it's also in the action. So that proactiveness is super important when you are in the strategic thinking realm and being strategic, period, for goals or in thinking or in anything. But you're looking at, how can I be proactive? How can I be ahead of the ball? How can I be in response mode versus reactive mode? In that kind of bubble, also learning boundaries to avoid being sucked into something that doesn't concern you or that isn't in alignment with the direction that you're going at the moment. And it's not necessary for you to participate in that. So having those boundaries are super important in strategic thinking.
Yes, absolutely, boundaries. But I also want to go back to your talking about reactive versus proactive. And I'm chuckling over here because just yesterday I had a conversation with a client who was so excited that they were finally being proactive and strategizing around a networking event. I love you. You've been a client of mine for years. Just signing up for the networking event is not really proactive, because her whole strategy was like, I'm going to go to the networking and I'm going to get business from it. But like, no strategy around talking to people, taking business cards, taking follow-up calls, doing one-on-ones, reaching out. She's like, if I just show up, then people are going to book me. I'm like, no. She was being proactive in planning something, but reactive in how she was planning on receiving information, receiving passive.
But
yes.
Not even reactive. She was being passive.
Yes. But she was like, oh, well, I'll just like hand out my business card. And like, then I'm like, no. So I really think about the actions that you do that you think are strategic, which, yeah, going to a network event is strategic in and of itself. If you have a plan and a strategy, again, it's strategic, but you need a strategy. Just going to those things starts putting you into a hamster wheel. So just doing things to do the things that people tell you are strategic isn't being strategic. Just going to the event doesn't mean you have a strategy behind it. So really think about, when you put these efforts in, And we've talked about this in a 100th episode, just talking about getting yourself out there and doing the things that actually make a difference and moving yourself forward. So when it comes to strategic thinking, and we did an episode on entrepreneurial mindset too, which is a great one to go back to as well. But that strategy does take some planning and some thinking. It's not passive. It's not reactive. As you said, there are going to be boundaries that you need to set up. When it comes to a strategic plan, don't forget the actual strategy. You can't just say that as a buzzword. Be like, oh, everything I do is strategic because I put it on my calendar. It's not strategy if you don't think about it and how it's going to react, how it's going to affect the rest of your plans and how you're going to put yourself out there and go from there. We don't want to be reactive. We want to be passive. I mean, sometimes you have to be. You can't always be proactive. It'll be exhausting. And you can, if you're thinking about strategic thinking, you do have to put a little bit more plan into it than just hoping that if you build it, they will come.
Well, yeah, I think that goes back to what we originally said, like that big picture, like where does it fit? Where does that fit in the whole of what you're doing? If your end result is to make it to a networking event, then maybe there was some strategy behind it. But at the end of the day, you're right. A lot of people use it for buzzwords and don't look at it from really truly what it means, because it is big picture. It is looking at all the different moving pieces and making decisions to absolutely get you there in the manner in which you want or need to get there. Because sometimes it's not the fastest way. Sometimes it's the most daunting way, I feel like. But that still could be your strategy, right? It's not the same, but when you are looking at a strategy thinking, you also need to look around at the people. And are you building a strategic network? Because we are the company that we keep. If you are in a group of people that don't understand big picture thinking, that are stuck in the mud with their own stuff, that can't get out of their own way, don't understand the journey, et cetera, then it makes it harder for you to have strategy and be a strategic thinker, because it rubs off. At the end of the day, it rubs off. So building a strategic network, and this could be in a new group of people, like I love to say, love them from afar, or it could be finding a mentor or a peer or advisor who can challenge you, push your buttons in a way that is going to push you to grow. Now, everybody I know needs that push, figuratively and literally, differently, but they're not your yes people. They're not just allowing you to go through the motions. They're pushing you to be more strategic. Or if this is like a whole new crew of people, building a network around you that also has the strategic thinking as a fiber that they're doing, that they're actively in, is going to help you stay in that mindset, stay in that vision and that movement a lot easier than if you're not.
100%. All those collaborations can really open new opportunities, not just physical opportunities that you're able to seek out, but also just in the opportunities that present themselves internally. Because if you're surrounding yourself with people who are growth and abundance mindset, you're going to see opportunities and resources for that growth that you're looking for, even if it's something that you're making up yourself. I can think of hundreds of occasions in my own life where I have been in rooms with people who constantly told me I couldn't do it, or that this wasn't something that was done, or that this isn't the way it is. And I had to push back till I had no people in my room, because you can't sit surrounded by people who are constantly telling you that it's not going to work and expect it to work. So building those strong relationships and cultivating these partnerships and these networks and these collaborations that will push you forward. Again, even if it's not a physical thing, like they're not necessarily giving you a new job or giving you a new client, like maybe they're just in the room that you always want to be in. Maybe their Tuesday is the way you want every day to be for you. So getting yourself in those rooms where you feel like you're not being laughed at or looked down upon for having the dreams that you have, for having the goals that you have, for having the strategies that you want to put in place. I mean, maybe that's a little bit small thinking. I don't know where all of you are hanging out, but I see it in a lot of my entrepreneurs or young aspiring business owners, or even new to business, maybe within the first 2 to 5 years, where they're suddenly outgrowing their circle. Because it's not that they don't want to see you grow or be better. It's just change is scary. And even for other people around you, change can be extra scary. To see you grow beyond them is scary. It's not necessarily even intentional. But building those relationships from a business and personal perspective is so important when you are looking to grow and strategize as an entrepreneur.
Yep, I agree. The thing, though, also with the groups is if people fear change and the unknown. And also with that, and this is not to make an excuse for them, but it is what it is. Also, we grow at different speeds, at different amounts, right? And so sometimes the people, even if they're not holding us back, they're not being strategic enough. Being strategic is a choice. I think some people, it comes like intuitively for them, but it's still a choice. It's still a choice for you to be strategic. So again, you are the company you keep. So if you're around people who aren't being that way by choice or by lifetime, maybe you need to change that up. Another thing that we kind of touched on but didn't really make as a point is analytical thinking. I think that that's really important because we do need to be questioning. We do need to be evaluating. We need to look at the big picture and what's going on today, because sometimes, we just had an election in the US. One thing can affect like our long-term vision like that, where something small can affect our long-term visions and goals that we're trying to make. So it's really important to have an analytical mind, critical thinking mind to evaluate. Just kind of maybe you have to adjust, or like Amanda was speaking earlier, with that agility to kind of change paths or put that on hold for right now, because it's better to put that on hold until you can get back to it again because of saving time or energy or money or whatnot. So really having analytical thinking or critical thinking is going to give you the ability to be able to assess, review, evaluate, and then put into place something new. There's many ways to get to the end result. It doesn't have to be, it's not just one pathway. And so sometimes we have to get on the back roads in order to get there, or sometimes we have to park it in a parking lot because it's the smartest thing to do to let things cool down. But that analytical thinking, that critical thinking fiber is, I believe, really important for strategic thinking as well.
Absolutely. It's all about risk management. I mean, you're trying to identify these potential risks that are associated with your strategies, with your goals, with your plans and contingency plans, and being prepared for those setbacks. I'm not saying to wallow in the setbacks, but be prepared to continue your momentum. We don't want to be stuck in a place where, because one thing happened, we don't have the resilience, like you said, to continue that forward momentum towards our major goal, towards our ultimate objective. Because being strategic is about that big picture. It is about that ultimate objective. It's not just the small goals we set, it's the big ones as well. The critical thinking is, obviously it's critical because it's called critical thinking. It is critical. And that risk management that you do with critical thinking is going to make or break whether or not you're actually achieving that ultimate goal that you have in mind.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up. The one point I do want to make is that it doesn't have to be also in response of. I think analytical thinking and critical thinking can be looking in the future of all the different potentials and possibilities. So I love that you brought up, of course you did, the risk management side and like the response side to things, but also with strategic thinking, remember, it is being proactive, like looking into the future of all of the things as well, because both sides are super important. You don't have to wait for something to happen for you to utilize that analytical thinking, that critical thinking. And, when you're talking to also adding in like the being creative, there's not one solution fits all. There's many possibilities to get from point A to point B. And I believe with strategic thinking, it's really important to dive back into that, the possibilities, the potential, the creativeness of it. And I think that kind of goes underneath this umbrella with the analytical or the critical thinking, but to make sure that you're infusing that creativeness into it, because otherwise things can get stagnant. It can get dull. When you're being strategic thinking, you can miss opportunity because you have blinders on. You're only looking one way. So not, again, in response of something, but putting that into your calendar to look at it through creative eyes, through potential or possibility eyes to see, because you might uncover something versus when you're in a reactive or responsive mode after cause and effect. So just keeping that in mind as well.
And you also said one thing, you touched on it, and I want to just throw it in your faces, so to speak. Monitoring and measuring an actual analytic, like established metrics. What are your KPIs? Like, what is telling you that it's effective and strategic? What benchmarks are you setting up, and what are the analytics behind them? Because I think a lot of times, and it blows me away sometimes, like you ask, okay, so how did this this perform? What's the percentage of this? How many new people did you have? And just crickets, no idea of any of the analytics, whether or not their marketing's working, whether or not their advertising is working, whether or not the strategies they put in place actually have working metrics. So please put something in place that you can actually monitor. Maybe it's just something as simple as how many email subscribers do you have? And your goal was to throw out a lead magnet. Well, how many email subscribers did you get? How many people hit that landing page that you created? Like any numbers at all, because that's going to help you strategize moving forward. It's not just what you have right now, it's what you have for the future. So you have to think ahead. And sometimes you need numbers to do that.
Yes. Yes. Another thing that we did not speak on that I think is important. I think really high level strategic thinkers understand that decision making has trade-offs, right? So when you choose one, you're saying no to another, and what the ripple effect is of both. So I think those who can really put themselves in a strategic thinking mind can look at both of those scenarios or multiple scenarios at one. And they understand, and this goes back to your risk management, they understand that there is risks and benefits to making these decisions that are in alignment with your big picture. And one of the biggest ones, and I know this is going to like get under your skin too, is like seeing all these people who say, oh, you can make $1 million without doing much by blah, 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 blah. And that's not true. Like that's almost never. Amanda and I didn't wake up with all of these businesses and being able to sell all these businesses and have the success level that we do. It took hard work. It took sacrifices. We chose not to do certain things in order to be able to put in the work to get where we're at. I'll give you a great example. When we are in a launch of one of our programs, I'm not going to certain things. I'm actually more at home as much as what it would be on my normal schedule, like extracurricular stuff, because I'm hyper focused in on making that happen. And I can tell when I'm not hyper focused in on our launch and I'm doing other things that we don't have as great of a success rate. So it's a trade-off. Do you want that to help you towards your goals and your vision or whatever you're trying to do? Or are you more in the now, right? And I think that kind of goes again to the original thing that we said, what strategic thinking is, thinking big picture and all of the different parts and modules that are you're being proactive and looking at everything that comes into play. Right. So the cause and the effect really, really, I think great strategic thinkers understands that decision making has a trade-off, a cause and effect, and they're okay with that. Sometimes you got to stay at home. Sometimes you're out there hustling, whatever it is.
I'm so glad you brought that up, because if one more person tells me that entrepreneurship is so easy, in 27 days, I actually had a client who came to me and was like, well, how long did it take you to hit your first 6 figures? And I'm like, well, with which business? Like, it's not like you just wake up tomorrow like, oh, well, so-and-so on the internet did it in 6 weeks. I'm like, that's crazy talk. It's great. I mean, but those are the exception, not the rule. And you're going to have to make those sacrifices. You're going to have to look at the big picture strategy, because sometimes, yes, wonderful. I'm so proud of all the people who overnight successed it. But I'm telling you, those overnight successes very rarely actually happened overnight. And they don't have growing power, staying power, scalability. They're just Haktua girls. Like it's one and done. And then you don't even properly strategize that. Anyway, I could go on and on and on and on about that. Being strategic, is going to be give and take. There is going to be stuff you have to give up. There is going to be stuff that you have to choose which path is the one that's going to be right for you at the time you're there. There's more than one way to do everything, despite what the younger me would have said, because it took me a long time to learn that there's more than one way to do something. It's not always my way or the highway. It's not really a thing. So there's more than one way to do things, which means you're going to have to let go of some of the things that aren't options. And you're going to have to let go of things that may not align with where you're ultimately trying to go. And sometimes it's not going to be as fast as you want it to be. Sorry. You're not listening to our podcast to hear us, blow sunshine up your butt. Sometimes it's not going to be as fun as you want it to be. And that's part of what sets entrepreneurs apart from everybody else. If it were easy, everybody would do it. If there were just a pill to be an entrepreneur, everybody would take it. But it's not that way. But You're a select few. And
the joke is, though, that you quit your 40-hour a week to work 40-hour days as an entrepreneur. I want to say that just because you're putting in more time doesn't mean that you're going to have that success. But that joke, I love that joke. So just to kind of bring it all, because I know we're at time, is why being strategic matters, are several things. First of all, it's going to help you maximize any resources, time, effort, things like that. It will help you look at wasted effort. If you are analyzing and kind of reflecting, you're going to see where you're spinning your tires, where you're wasting your effort, because you're wanting to be strategic. Strategic is intentional, proactive movement towards an end something, right? And also being strategic can help you build resilience, because I think strategic is getting you to look at it from different angles. It's also looking at the cause and the effect. So you can prepare for challenges ahead because you're looking at the whole and seeing what's the best way to move forward versus just looking at the next step in front of you. And I think that being strategic is about helping you have a clear roadmap. So I just wrote a post actually this week about like living in the unknown, in that limbo state. And sometimes that roadmap is just basic, real basics, but still it gives you a bit more of a roadmap to move forward with.
Absolutely. You know, Lynn and I can talk strategy all day long. I think we probably have talked strategy to one another an alarming amount, quite frankly. Hours spent strategizing and hours spent saving where we could have been wasting our efforts other places. And I would encourage all of my leaders, business owners, entrepreneurs to take some time to actually strategize around your business and what you're doing. It's not wasted time just data dumping and trying to think of things up. It's not wasted time. It is essential. It is important for your business to see growth and scaling with that strategy. You've got to see big picture, and you can't do it if you just are stuck in the daily tasks every day, day in and day out, doing the things to run the business. You have to also be strategizing, or you're not going to get anywhere, or at least nowhere close to where you could be if you really think about the strategy.
Yeah, how are you being more intentional with your movements and reactions and responses and being proactive with everything? So drop us a line. Let us know what you liked out of this podcast. Share it with those who you feel could use a little bit of, maybe have talked to you about strategic thinking and might need a little bit more help or some different perspective. But definitely, once you've listened to this and some little thoughts occurred, put it into action. Like, don't let it sit. Don't let it
sit. And speaking of putting in some action, make sure you are subscribing. It costs you nothing to subscribe, but it will help us out a lot. So make sure you're subscribing or following, depending on where you are and which platform you're on. We love to see those follows and subscribes.
Absolutely. Till next time.
Get after it.
All right, everyone. It's not enough to just listen.
Now you've got to put it into action.
We are so excited to see what you do next.
If you enjoyed our show, please leave us a review on iTunes.
And to find out more about what we're doing, visit us at thepursuitofbadasserie.com.